Her husband rejected her for being childless, until a single billionaire dad with 2 kids chose her. Snow fell like forgotten prayers on the woman who'd been told she wasn't enough, until 2 small hands reached for hers in a park where miracles weren't supposed to happen, and a billionaire's frozen heart began to thaw. Elena Markson pressed her gloved hands against the frost-covered bench in Central Park, welcoming the bite of December cold against her skin. Pain, she'd learned, was better than numbness. At least pain reminded you that you were still alive, still capable of feeling something other than the hollow ache that had taken residence in her chest 6 months ago. The divorce papers were finalized in June. By July, David had already posted photos with someone new, a blonde woman with a pregnant belly, glowing with the future Elena could never give him. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who'd sworn to love her forever couldn't even wait half a year to replace her with a functional uterus. "You're better off without him," her best friend Keisha had said over wine in Elena's cramped Queens apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes that seemed to mock her failed attempts at starting over. "Any man who'd leave you over something you can't control isn't worth your tears." But Keisha didn't understand. Nobody did. It wasn't just about David leaving. It was about the dream dying, the white picket fence, the nursery painted in soft yellows, the family portraits that would never exist. At 24, Elena felt ancient, used up, discarded like a defective product returned to the manufacturer. The publishing house where she worked as a junior editor had become her refuge, but even there, reminders lurked around every corner. Baby shower invitations. Pregnancy announcements. Casual conversations about pediatricians and preschools that made her want to scream. So she'd started taking long walks in Central Park during her lunch breaks, seeking solace in the anonymous crowds. Today, the snowstorm had thinned the usual masses, leaving the park eerily quiet. Perfect. Elena pulled her thin coat tighter, another casualty of her reduced circumstances. The good winter coat had been sacrificed to pay for the lawyer, and watched the snow accumulate on her worn boots. Somewhere in this city, David was probably shopping for cribs. Somewhere, women were becoming mothers with an ease that felt like a personal insult. She closed her eyes, letting the cold seep deeper. "Daddy, why is that lady crying?" The child's voice cut through Elena's reverie. She quickly wiped her face, unaware tears had been falling, and looked up to see a little girl with deep brown eyes and a pink winter coat pointing directly at her. Behind the child stood a tall man with 2 other children, a boy who looked withdrawn and another little girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Maya, we don't point," the man said, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed. But there was something else there too, a weariness that Elena recognized because she heard it in her own voice every morning. Their eyes met across the snow-dusted path. His were a striking gray, the color of storm clouds, and for a moment, Elena saw her own exhaustion reflected back at her. This was a man who understood loss, who carried grief like a second skin. "I'm sorry," Elena said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "I'm fine." "Really?" But Maya, that's what he'd called her, wasn't convinced. The little girl pulled away from her father's hand and walked directly to Elena, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. Up close, Elena could see the sadness in those young eyes, a grief too heavy for such small shoulders. "You don't look fine," Maya said with the brutal honesty only children possess. "You look like how Daddy looks at night when he thinks we're sleeping." "Maya." The man moved quickly, genuine alarm crossing his handsome features. "I'm so sorry," he said to Elena, his British accent softened by years in America. "She's usually not this forward." "It's okay," Elena heard herself say. And strangely, it was. There was something disarming about the child's directness, something refreshing after months of people tiptoeing around her pain with platitudes and pity. The boy, Oliver, she would later learn, hung back, watching the interaction with suspicious eyes. The other little girl sucked her thumb, her gaze darting between Elena and her father like she was watching a tennis match. "Are you sad because you lost someone too?" Maya asked, ignoring her father's mortified expression. "We lost our mommy." 2 years ago. Cancer took her away. The word hung in the frozen air between them, sharp and final. Elena's breath caught. She looked at the man, really looked at him this time. Expensive coat, designer boots, the kind of casual wealth that spoke of private schools and summer homes. But none of it could protect him from the devastation she saw in his eyes. None of it could bring back what cancer had stolen. "I'm Andre Khan," he said, extending a hand, perhaps to deflect from his daughter's painful honesty. "And this is Maya, Oliver, and Sophie. We're attempting what their therapist calls normal family activities." His smile was self-deprecating. "We're not very good at it yet." Elena shook his hand, surprised by the warmth of it, the solidness. "Elena Markson. And for what it's worth, I don't think anyone's really good at this part. What would you do if a stranger's child revealed a pain that mirrored your own? Sometimes the most healing connections come from the most unexpected places. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts, and also let us know where you are watching from." The snow fell harder now, transforming Central Park into something from a holiday card, the kind Elena used to dream about when she imagined her future family's Christmas traditions. She should leave, return to her desk and the manuscript that needed editing by 5. But Maya's small hand had found hers, warm despite the cold, and Elena couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her with such uncomplicated trust. "Do you want to feed the ducks with us?" Maya asked, her voice bright with hope. "Daddy brought bread, but Oliver says the ducks are probably hiding from the snow and we're wasting our time." "They are hiding," Oliver muttered from behind his father, his voice carrying the weight of a child who'd stopped believing in simple joys. "Everything always disappoints you anyway." Andre's jaw tightened. Elena watched him struggle for the right words, the right response to a son who'd armored himself in cynicism. She recognized that struggle. She'd had similar conversations with herself in the mirror, trying to convince the reflection that hope wasn't just another word for inevitable heartbreak. "I'd love to feed the ducks," Elena said, surprising herself. "Even if they're hiding. Sometimes the important thing isn't whether they show up, it's that we tried." Oliver's eyes flicked to her, suspicious but curious. Sophie stopped sucking her thumb long enough to whisper something to her stuffed rabbit. "You don't have to," Andre began, but Elena was already standing, Maya's hand still clutched in hers. "I know," she said. "But I want to." It was true. For the first time in months, the crushing weight of her loneliness had lifted slightly, just enough to let her breathe. These children, with their raw grief and their father's obvious devotion despite his own pain, reminded her that she wasn't the only one stumbling through a world that had stopped making sense. They walked together toward the lake, an odd constellation of broken people pretending at normalcy. Andre fell into step beside Elena while Maya chattered between them, filling the silence with observations about snowflakes and how each one was unique, just like people, Daddy says, except some people are more special than others. "I apologize again for Maya's earlier comments," Andre said quietly, his accent wrapping around the words like velvet. "Her therapist says she's processing her grief through radical honesty." "It's exhausting." Elena glanced at him. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. He couldn't be much older than 35, but grief had aged him. She understood that too, how loss carved years into your face that time alone couldn't account for. "She told me the truth," Elena said. "That's rarer than you'd think. Most people just offer empty platitudes or avoid you entirely because your pain makes them uncomfortable. You sound like you speak from experience. Recent experience." The words came easier than expected. "My husband left me 6 months ago. Turned out, in sickness and in health, had an asterisk he forgot to mention during our vows." Andre stopped walking. The children had run ahead to the lake's edge, Maya dragging a reluctant Oliver while Sophie trailed behind like a small, colorful ghost. "I'm sorry," he said, and the simple words carried genuine weight. Not pity. Not awkward discomfort. Just recognition of pain from someone who knew its landscape intimately. He wanted children, Elena continued, unsure why she was sharing this with a stranger in a snowstorm. I can't have them. Unexplained infertility, the doctors called it. Like giving it a medical name would make it hurt less. She laughed, the sound bitter even to her own ears. Funny thing is, I would have been a good mother. But apparently, biology trumps everything else. Biology is a cruel architect, Andre said softly. It builds us with all these capacities for love and loss, then gives us no blueprint for how to survive when everything collapses. They stood there, two people bound by the particular loneliness that comes from being rejected by the futures they'd planned. Around them, the snow continued its relentless descent, covering the world in white silence. Miss Elena. Maya's voice shattered the moment. Come quick. I think I see a duck. Elena looked at Andre, saw something unspoken pass between them, an understanding, perhaps, or simply the recognition of two people treading water in the same deep ocean. We should, she gestured toward the children. Yes. But he didn't move immediately. Elena, I know this is unexpected, but would you consider joining us? For duck feeding, I mean. The children, he paused, choosing his words carefully, they seem lighter with you here. Maya hasn't smiled like that since before Sophia died. Elena's throat tightened. She should say no. Should protect herself from getting attached to a ready-made family that wasn't hers, could never be hers. Should return to her safe, isolated grief where no one could hurt her again. But Maya was waving frantically from the lake's edge, and Sophie had actually smiled, and even Oliver looked marginally less like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. Okay, Elena heard herself say. But only if you promise the ducks will be sufficiently impressed by our offerings. Andre's smile transformed his face, chasing away some of the sorrow. I can't promise that. But I can promise hot chocolate afterward. There's a cafe nearby that makes the best in Manhattan. Now you're just bribing me. Absolutely. His eyes crinkled with the first genuine humor she'd seen. Is it working? Despite everything, despite David and the divorce and the empty future stretching before her, Elena laughed. Yes. Yes, it is. The ducks, as Oliver had predicted, were nowhere to be found. But somehow, it didn't matter. Maya tossed bread crumbs into the gray water with theatrical flourishes, narrating an elaborate story about duck royalty hiding in underwater palaces. Sophie watched with wide eyes, occasionally contributing a whispered detail about the duck princess's crown. Even Oliver, despite his best efforts to remain aloof, corrected Maya's facts about duck biology with the precision of a child who'd spent too much time reading instead of playing. Elena found herself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in months. There was something absurdly perfect about standing in a snowstorm, throwing bread to invisible ducks, surrounded by children who barely knew her but had somehow decided she belonged there. You're good with them, Andre said, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated, like cedar and winter air. I always thought I would be, Elena replied, watching Maya spin in circles, arms outstretched to catch snowflakes. Before I knew I couldn't have my own, I used to imagine what kind of mother I'd be. Silly, I suppose. Not silly. Human. Andre tossed his own bread crumbs, though his attention remained on Elena. Sophia used to say that the worst part of her diagnosis wasn't the fear of dying, it was the fear of leaving them without a mother. She made me promise I'd find someone eventually. Someone who could love them the way she did. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. And have you? Elena asked gently. Looking for someone? God, no. The admission came quickly, almost defensively. How could I? Every woman I meet either sees dollar signs or runs screaming from the reality of an instant family with emotional baggage. The few dates I've attempted have been disasters. One woman actually asked if the children could stay with relatives when we went out. He shook his head. They're not accessories I can remove for convenience. They're my world. Elena heard the fierce protectiveness in his voice and felt something shift in her chest. David had abandoned her the moment she became inconvenient. But here was a man who'd built his entire life around protecting his children's hearts, even as his own shattered. Miss Elena. Maya appeared suddenly, snow clinging to her dark curls. Are you married? Do you have babies? Maya, that's inappropriate, Andre started, but Elena raised a hand. It's okay. She crouched down to Maya's eye level. No, sweetheart. I'm not married anymore. And I don't have babies. Why not? Maya's directness was startling but not unkind. Don't you want them? I wanted them very much, Elena said honestly. But sometimes our bodies don't cooperate with what our hearts want. And the person I was married to decided that was more important than loving me. Maya's face scrunched up in confusion. That's stupid. Daddy says love isn't about what people can give you, it's about who they are inside. Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought. She glanced up at Andre, who looked simultaneously mortified and proud of his daughter's wisdom. Your daddy is very smart, Elena said. He's sad though, Maya continued, apparently on a roll. He pretends he's not, but I hear him sometimes. Late at night. He talks to pictures of mommy and cries. She leaned in conspiratorially. I think he needs a friend. Someone who understands about being sad. Maya Khan, that's enough, Andre said, his voice strained. But when Elena stood and looked at him, she saw not anger but vulnerability, the raw exposure of a man whose 6-year-old had just revealed his midnight grief to a stranger. I cry to pictures too, Elena said softly, holding his gaze. Of the life I thought I'd have. The family in my head that never got to exist. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Oliver had stopped throwing bread and was watching them with an intensity that belied his 8 years. Sophie had moved closer to her father's leg, sensing the emotional shift even if she couldn't articulate it. The hot chocolate, Andre said finally, his voice rough. We should, before we all freeze to death out here. Yes, Elena agreed, though neither of them moved immediately. Maya solved the problem by grabbing Elena's hand again. You have to sit next to me at the cafe. And help me with the marshmallows. Daddy always gives me too many and then I get hyper and he regrets it. I do not regret, Andre started, but Oliver interrupted. Yes, you do. Last time you said, and I quote, never again will I make the mistake of unlimited marshmallows. Andre sighed dramatically. Betrayed by my own son. They walked together toward the park exit, their footsteps creating temporary imprints in the fresh snow before being covered again. Elena realized with a start that she hadn't checked her phone once, hadn't thought about work or David or the empty apartment waiting for her in Queens. For the first time in 6 months, she'd been fully present in a moment. And the moment, surprisingly, hadn't hurt. The cafe Andre led them to was tucked into a side street near Columbus Circle, the kind of place Elena would never have found on her own, small, warm, with mismatched furniture and the rich smell of chocolate and cinnamon. A bell chimed as they entered, and Maya immediately dragged Elena toward a corner booth with a view of the snow-covered street. This is our spot, Maya announced. Daddy brings us here every Tuesday for therapy debriefing. That means we talk about our feelings until Sophie falls asleep in her hot chocolate. I do not, Sophie protested quietly, but her eyes were already heavy-lidded from the warmth. Andre ordered for everyone, apparently their usual orders were memorized by the staff, and settled into the booth with the ease of routine. Elena found herself wedged between Maya and the wall, enveloped in the scent of children's shampoo and chocolate. This, she thought with a pang, is what I was supposed to have. But instead of the usual bitterness, she felt something else. Something almost like peace. The hot chocolate arrived in oversized mugs topped with whipped cream mountains and, despite Andre's earlier protests, an abundance of marshmallows. Maya's eyes lit up like Times Square at midnight, and even Oliver managed a small smile as he carefully arranged his marshmallows into a geometric pattern before allowing them to melt. Elena wrapped her hands around the warmth of her mug, feeling the heat seep into her frozen fingers. Across the table, Andre watched his children with an expression that made Elena's chest ache, love mixed with helplessness, devotion shadowed by the fear that he wasn't enough. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself every time David had looked at her with disappointment, every time another pregnancy test came back negative, every time she'd failed at the one thing society told her should come naturally. "So, Miss Elena," Oliver said, breaking his self-imposed silence. His voice carried the formal distance of a child who'd learned to protect himself. "What do you do?" "For work, I mean." "I'm an editor at a publishing house," Elena replied. "I help make books better before they're published." "What kind of books?" Oliver's interest seemed genuine, a crack in his armor. "All kinds. Right now, I'm working on a middle-grade novel about a girl who discovers she can talk to animals, but only the ones that are invisible to everyone else." "That's cool," Oliver admitted reluctantly. Then, as if catching himself showing enthusiasm, he added, "I guess." "Oliver loves reading," Andre interjected. "Gets lost in books the way some kids get lost in video games. His therapist says it's his way of escaping into worlds where mothers don't die and fathers don't fall apart." The brutal honesty hit like a slap. Andre seemed to realize it too, his jaw tightening as Oliver's face flushed red. "I don't think that's entirely fair," Elena said carefully. "Books aren't just escapism. They're practice for living. They teach us how to navigate emotions we haven't experienced yet, how to survive things we hope never happen." She looked directly at Oliver. "There's nothing wrong with seeking comfort in stories. That's what makes us human." Oliver stared at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement if not quite acceptance. "I like stories too," Sophie whispered, her first unprompted words. "Mommy used to read to me every night. The one about the Velveteen Rabbit who became real because someone loved him enough." The table fell silent. Andre's hand trembled slightly as he reached across to stroke Sophie's hair. "I could read to you sometime," Elena heard herself offer. "If you'd like. If your father doesn't mind." 3 pairs of young eyes turned to Andre, waiting. Elena realized with a start what she'd just done, inserted herself into their lives, crossed a boundary from stranger to something more. She should take it back, protect herself from the inevitable hurt when this temporary connection dissolved. But Andre was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You don't have to." "I know," Elena interrupted. "But I want to. If the offer's welcome." "It's welcome," Maya answered before her father could. "Very, very welcome. We need more women around who don't make Daddy nervous." "Maya." Andre's voice pitched higher. "I am not nervous around women." "You are too," Oliver contributed, apparently deciding Elena had earned his commentary. "Last month when Mrs. Henderson from the PDA tried to talk to you, you literally ran away." "I watched you run, Dad. You're a 36-year-old billionaire and you ran from a woman with a clipboard." Andre covered his face with his hands. "This is not the character assassination I needed today." Elena laughed, the sound bubbling up unexpectedly. "A clipboard is terrifying. I once hid in a supply closet to avoid someone with a petition." "See?" Andre gestured at Elena. "She understands." They fell into easier conversation then, the tension dissipating like steam from their hot chocolate. Maya told elaborate stories about her kindergarten class, where apparently a boy named Timothy ate paste regularly and their teacher pretended not to notice. Sophie contributed small observations about her stuffed animal's complex social hierarchy. Oliver discussed the latest book he'd read with the intensity of a literature professor. And Andre watched Elena interact with his children with an expression that made her simultaneously warm and terrified. She recognized hunger when she saw it, not the predatory kind, but the desperate longing for normalcy, for someone who could step into the gaping hole grief had carved in their lives. "What happened with your husband?" Oliver asked suddenly, his directness rivaling Maya's. "Why did he really leave?" "Oliver, that's none of our business," Andre started, but Elena shook her head. "It's okay." She set down her mug, choosing her words carefully. "Your father mentioned your mother had cancer." "Well, my body has its own kind of sickness, not one that will kill me, but one that means I can't have children. And my husband decided that was something he couldn't live with." "That's stupid," Oliver declared. "You're sitting here being nice to us and we're not even yours." Why couldn't he see that being a parent isn't just about biology? The wisdom coming from an 8-year-old's mouth stunned Elena into silence. She felt tears prickling behind her eyes and fought them back. "I wish I knew," she managed. "I wish I'd been enough just as I was." "You are enough," Sophie said softly, her small voice carrying unexpected conviction. "Mommy used to say that people who leave are just making room for the people who'll stay." Andre's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Your mother was a very smart woman." "The smartest," Maya agreed. Then, with the fearless optimism of youth, she announced, "I think Miss Elena should come to our house for dinner. Tonight. Daddy makes this pasta thing that's actually edible, and we have a really big TV and Sophie's probably going to fall asleep during the movie anyway, so there'll be an extra spot on the couch." "Maya, you can't just invite people," Andre tried, but all 3 children were now looking at Elena with varying degrees of hope. Elena should say no. Should maintain boundaries. Should protect her healing heart from attachment to a family that could never be hers. "What kind of pasta?" she asked instead. Andre's smile was slow, transforming his face. "Carbonara. The real kind, none of that cream sauce nonsense." "Well," Elena said, feeling herself step off a cliff she couldn't see the bottom of, "I suppose I should verify these claims. For journalistic integrity." "You're an editor, not a journalist," Oliver pointed out. "Close enough." Maya cheered. Sophie smiled into her hot chocolate. Oliver tried to hide his pleased expression behind another sip. And Andre looked at Elena like she'd just handed him something precious and fragile, something he'd thought was lost forever. Neither of them realized they were both terrified of the exact same thing, that this moment of unexpected grace would shatter before they could figure out what it meant. The Khan penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building overlooking Central Park, the kind of residence Elena had only seen in magazines about lifestyles she'd never touch. The elevator required a key card, and when the doors opened directly into the apartment's foyer, she had to suppress a gasp. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like a living painting. The interior was all clean lines and expensive neutrals, beautiful, sophisticated, and utterly devoid of warmth. It looked like a showroom waiting for actual people to move in. "I know," Andre said quietly, reading her expression. "It's not exactly homey. Sophia decorated our old place. This one. I hired someone after she died. Told them to make it look like the magazines. Biggest mistake I ever made." Elena understood immediately. He tried to erase the memories by erasing the personality, not realizing that sterility couldn't heal grief, it just gave it more room to echo. "It's very clean," she offered diplomatically. "It's very sad," Oliver corrected, dropping his backpack by the door. "Like living in a hotel nobody wants to stay at." "Oliver," Andre's voice carried a warning, but his son wasn't wrong. Maya had already kicked off her boots and was pulling Elena toward a hallway. "Come see my room. It's the only place that doesn't look like a boring grown-up museum." Maya's room was indeed an explosion of color, pink walls covered in children's artwork, stuffed animals piled on a bed shaped like a castle, glow-in-the-dark stars scattered across the ceiling. It looked lived in, loved, real. "I drew all these," Maya said proudly, gesturing to the gallery wall. "That's me and Oliver and Sophie. That's Daddy looking tired. And that one," she pointed to a picture of 4 stick figures, one with angel wings hovering above the others, that's our family. Mommy watches us from heaven. Elena's throat tightened. The simple theology of a child's grief, that death was just relocation, that love transcended the boundary between worlds. She wished she could see things with such clarity. They're beautiful, Elena said honestly. Do you want to draw with me sometime? Maya asked. Daddy tries, but he's terrible. He draws stick figures that look like broken pencils. I heard that. Andre's voice carried from the kitchen, followed by the sound of pots clanging. Elena laughed. I'd love to draw with you. Good. It's settled then. Maya said it with such finality, as if Elena's presence in their lives was now an established fact rather than a random afternoon anomaly. They returned to the main living area where Sophie had claimed a corner of the massive sectional sofa, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Oliver sat at the other end, already absorbed in a book. The space between them felt symbolic, two children in the same room but inhabiting separate islands of grief. Can I help with dinner? Elena asked, finding Andre in the kitchen, a chef's dream of marble and stainless steel that looked barely used. You don't have to. I know. But I want to. She was starting to sound like a broken record, but it was true. Being here, with these broken, beautiful people, felt more right than anything had in months. Andre handed her a cutting board and vegetables. Salad duty, then. Fair warning, I'm decent at pasta but apparently incapable of making vegetables appealing to children. They worked in companionable silence for a moment, the only sounds of the knife against the cutting board and water boiling on the stove. Through the doorway, Elena could see the children, Maya now sprawled on the floor coloring, Sophie's eyes growing heavy, Oliver turning pages with mechanical precision. This is strange, isn't it? Andre said suddenly. A few hours ago, we were strangers. Now you're in my kitchen helping make dinner like we do this every Tuesday. Completely bizarre, Elena agreed. I should probably be terrified. You could be a serial killer who uses your adorable children as bait. Damn, you've uncovered my master plan. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time. Though I should point out that serial killers rarely make proper carbonara. We're more of a microwave dinner crowd. Dark humor. I like it. Elena chopped a cucumber with perhaps more violence than necessary. My therapist says I use sarcasm as a defense mechanism. My therapist says I use work as an excuse to avoid processing emotions. Andre stirred the pasta water. Between the four of us, we keep several mental health professionals employed. To therapy, Elena raised an imaginary glass. To survival, Andre countered, and something in his tone made it clear he meant it literally. These weren't people who'd been sad, they'd been drowning, barely keeping their heads above water. Can I ask you something? Elena set down the knife. Why me? Why invite a complete stranger into your home, around your children? You don't know anything about me. Andre was quiet for a moment, his attention focused on straining pasta. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Because when Maya grabbed your hand, you didn't flinch. You didn't look at my children like they were damaged goods or pitted them like broken toys. You looked at them like they were just children. Sad children, yes, but still whole. Still worthy of uncomplicated affection. He turned to face her, and Elena saw the exhaustion in every line of his face. Do you know how rare that is? Most people either avoid us entirely, widower with baggage, too complicated, or they approach with this awful, suffocating pity. They treat the kids like trauma exhibits. But you laughed with them. You let Maya be pushy and Oliver be prickly and Sophie be quiet. You didn't try to fix them. I can't fix them, Elena said. I can't even fix myself. Exactly. Andre's smile was sad. Maybe that's why they liked you so much. You don't have an agenda. You're not trying to be their new mother or get to me through them. You're just, there. Present. Real. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, some sealed-off place she'd been protecting. I like them too, she admitted. More than I should after one afternoon. It's dangerous, Andre. For me, I mean. I can't have children, and being around yours, it reminds me of everything I've lost. Everything I'll never have. I know, he said quietly. And I'm sorry. If this is too painful, I understand. You can leave right now, no hard feelings. I'll tell the kids you had an emergency. Elena looked through the doorway at the children. Maya had abandoned her coloring to build an elaborate fortress from sofa cushions. Sophie had finally given in to sleep, her small body curled around her rabbit. Oliver had put down his book and was watching his sisters with an expression that broke Elena's heart, the face of a child forced to grow up too fast, to be the responsible one when he should still be allowed to just be a kid. These weren't her children. Would never be her children. But at this moment, they needed someone, and she needed to be needed. I'm not leaving, Elena said. Not tonight, anyway. Let's just, take it one dinner at a time. Andre nodded, relief evident in the release of tension from his shoulders. One dinner at a time. They finished cooking in a silence that felt less awkward than understanding. When Andre called the children to the table, a massive piece of reclaimed wood that looked like it could seat 12 but currently held just 5 place settings, Elena felt a strange sense of déjà vu. This was the scene she'd imagined countless times, a family gathering for dinner, the comfortable chaos of children and food and conversation. Except this wasn't her family. This was borrowed warmth, temporary reprieve from loneliness for all of them. Maya insisted Elena sit next to her. Oliver took the seat across from them, and Andre settled at the head of the table with Sophie beside him, still drowsy from her impromptu nap. We say grace, Maya announced. Well, kind of. We say things we're grateful for. Daddy started it after Mommy died so we'd remember there's still good stuff even when everything feels terrible. Maya's version, not mine, Andre clarified, but he was smiling. They joined hands around the table, and Elena felt the small warmth of Maya's palm in her right hand, the solid strength of Oliver's reluctant grip in her left. Across from her, Andre closed his eyes. I'm grateful for hot chocolate, Maya started. And new friends who don't mind when I ask too many questions. I'm grateful for books, Oliver said quietly. And days that don't completely suck. Sophie whispered something into her rabbit, too soft for Elena to hear, but Andre nodded as if he understood. Then everyone was looking at her, waiting. Elena's throat tightened. She thought about David, about the divorce papers and the failed fertility treatments and the apartment in Queens that felt more like a prison than a home. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, hopeful, naive, certain that love would be enough. But she also thought about snow falling in Central Park, about invisible ducks and overflowing marshmallows, about 3 children who'd somehow decided she was worth trusting. I'm grateful, she said, her voice rough with emotion, for unexpected invitations and second chances at joy. Andre's eyes met hers across the table, and in them she saw understanding, gratitude, and something else, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I'm grateful, he said finally, that my daughter has terrible boundaries and no sense of appropriate stranger danger. The children laughed, the sound filling the sterile penthouse with life. And for the first time since the divorce, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this after all. Dinner was chaotic in the best possible way. Maya narrated every bite, convinced the pasta was almost as good as the Italian place Mommy used to take us to. Oliver corrected her pronunciation of carbonara 3 times with increasing exasperation. Sophie ate in concentrated silence, occasionally offering a noodle to her stuffed rabbit. Elena found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it, the casual bickering, the inside jokes she was slowly beginning to understand, the way Andre navigated his children's emotions with practiced care. This was what she'd mourned losing with David, not just the hypothetical children, but the entire ecosystem of family life. Miss Elena, Oliver said suddenly, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. Do you think it's okay to be angry at people who die? The table went silent. Andre's hand stilled on his water glass. Maya's constant chatter stopped mid-sentence. Elena took a breath, understanding the weight of the question. I think, she said carefully, that anger is just love with nowhere to go. When someone leaves, whether they choose to or they don't have a choice, we feel abandoned. And sometimes anger is easier than admitting how much it hurts to be left behind. Oliver's eyes were suspiciously bright. My therapist says the same thing. But it feels wrong. Mom didn't want to die. She fought really hard. So being angry at her feels like I'm being ungrateful or something. You're allowed to feel however you feel, Elena said. Grief isn't logical. It doesn't follow rules. Some days you'll miss her. Some days you'll be angry. Some days you'll be both at the same time. All of it is okay. Were you angry at your husband? Oliver asked. When did he left? Furious, Elena admitted. Still am, some days. But mostly I'm angry at myself for not being enough to make him stay. That's stupid, Maya interjected with her characteristic bluntness. You're obviously enough. He was just too dumb to see it. Andre choked on his water. Maya, we don't call people stupid. But he was. Maya's face was flushed with righteous indignation. Miss Elena is nice and funny and pretty and she doesn't treat us like we're weird. Any man who doesn't want her is definitely stupid. I appreciate the defense, Elena said, oddly touched by the 6-year-old's fierce loyalty. But it's more complicated than that. No, it's not, Oliver said, surprising everyone. People either show up or they don't. Mom didn't have a choice. Your husband did. That makes him worse, not better. The simple moral clarity of children, their ability to cut through adult rationalizations and see truth in black and white. Elena had spent months trying to understand David's perspective, to make excuses for his abandonment. But these kids saw it exactly as it was, a choice to leave, a decision that love wasn't enough. You're right, she said quietly. You're absolutely right. Andre was looking at her with an intensity that made her skin warm. The wisdom of 8-year-olds, he said lightly, but his voice carried an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. After dinner, Maya insisted on showing Elena every corner of the penthouse, the library that took up half the second floor. Daddy built it for Mom, but now Oliver lives in here, the media room with its enormous screen. We're supposed to watch educational stuff but Daddy lets us watch Marvel movies. Sophie's room decorated in soft purples and grays. She picked sad colors because she feels sad inside. That's what her therapist said. Each room told a story of a family trying to reconstruct itself around an absence. Sophia's ghost lived in every careful choice, every preserved memory, every space that seemed to be waiting for someone who would never return. Finally, Maya dragged her to the terrace, a wraparound outdoor space that shouldn't exist in Manhattan winters but somehow did, complete with heat lamps and weatherproof furniture. The view was spectacular, Central Park spread below them like a snow-covered blanket, the city lights twinkling in the darkness. This is where Daddy comes when he's extra sad, Maya confided, her voice dropping to a whisper. I see him sometimes from my window. He stands out here and talks to the sky like Mommy can hear him. Elena's heart clenched. Maya, I don't think your father would want you telling me. It's okay, Andre's voice came from behind them. She's not wrong. He stepped onto the terrace, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. Kids are in the media room. Sophie's already asleep on Oliver, and Maya's turn is coming soon if I know anything about sugar crashes. He handed Elena a mug. Thought you might need this. It's freezing out here. You have heat lamps, Elena pointed out, but she accepted the coffee gratefully. Physics is not my strong suit. He leaned against the railing, his profile sharp against the city lights. I'm sorry about Maya's commentary. She means well, but her filter is non-existent. She's perceptive, Elena said. They all are. Too perceptive for their ages. Trauma does that. Forces you to grow up faster than you should. Andre sipped his coffee. Oliver was 6 when Sophia was diagnosed. By the time she died, he'd already learned to read her pain levels, to know when she needed quiet versus when she needed distraction. No child should have to become a caretaker. And you? Elena asked gently. Who took care of you? Andre's laugh was hollow. My assistant scheduled therapy appointments. My board of directors handled the company. My housekeeper made sure the children ate. I just existed. Went through the motions. Signed papers and showed up to meetings and tucked my kids in at night while slowly dying inside. The raw honesty hit Elena like a physical blow. This wasn't the polished billionaire facade, this was a man stripped down to his grief, too exhausted to pretend anymore. I know that feeling, she whispered. That sense that you're performing being alive rather than actually living. Is that what you're doing now? Performing? Elena considered the question. I was. This morning, this afternoon, I was absolutely performing. Going through my routine, editing manuscripts I didn't care about, eating lunch I didn't taste. But tonight. She turned to face him. Tonight I forgot to perform. I was just, here. Andre set down his mug, his gray eyes searching her face. Elena, I need to be honest with you. This, he gestured between them, whatever this is, it's dangerous for me. For my children. They're already attached to you. Maya's probably planning your wedding to me as we speak. And if you walk away tomorrow, if this was just a one-time kindness, they'll be devastated. I know, Elena said, her heart hammering. It's dangerous for me too. Being around your family, seeing what I can never have, it's like pressing on a bruise. But I can't seem to make myself leave. Then don't. The words hung in the cold air between them, heavy with possibility. Andre, we met 6 hours ago, Elena said, trying to inject reason into a situation that had lost all rational boundaries. This is insane. People don't just, this doesn't happen in real life. You're right. It doesn't. He took a step closer, and Elena could smell his cologne mixed with coffee and winter air. But here's what I know, my children smiled more today than they have in months. Sophie spoke to you without prompting. Oliver engaged in conversation beyond monosyllables. Maya was just Maya, unfiltered and joyful. And I, his voice dropped, I felt something other than numbness for the first time since Sophia died. Elena's breath caught. What are you asking me? I'm not asking anything. I'm just, being honest. You walked into our lives today, and somehow everything shifted. I don't know what that means or where it goes or if it's just temporary insanity brought on by grief and loneliness. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. But I know that when I think about you leaving tonight and never seeing you again, something in my chest physically hurts. Andre. I'm not in love with you, he interrupted quickly. That would be absurd. But I think I could be. Given time. Given a chance. And that terrifies me because I swore I'd never do this again, never risk my heart, never let my children risk theirs. But here you are, and all my careful rules seem meaningless. Have you ever met someone and known immediately that they could change everything? Sometimes the scariest moments are the ones that lead to the most beautiful transformations. What do you think Elena should do? Leave your thoughts below. Elena set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. I can't be a rebound. I can't be the woman who fills the void Sophia left. I've already been someone's second choice once, and I barely survived it. You wouldn't be, Andre said fiercely. Sophia was my wife. The mother of my children. Nothing changes that. But she's gone, Elena. And I'm still here, still alive, still capable of feeling something other than grief. Is that a betrayal? Or is it just, survival? I don't know, Elena whispered. I don't know anything anymore. They stood there on the terrace, two broken people contemplating whether their jagged edges might somehow fit together or just cause more damage. The city sprawled below them, indifferent to their crisis, and somewhere inside the penthouse, three children slept, dreaming their own dreams of healing. Come back, Andre said finally. Tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you're ready. No pressure, no expectations. Just, come back. Let us figure out what this is. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every logical bone in her body screamed to run, to protect herself, to not risk her healing heart on a ready-made family she could never truly belong to. But when she opened her eyes and looked at Andre, really looked at him, she saw not pity or obligation, but hope. Fragile, terrified hope that maybe they could save each other from drowning. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll come back. The smile that broke across Andre's face was worth every risk, every potential heartbreak. For better or worse, Elena Markson was about to discover that sometimes the family you're meant for finds you in the most unexpected places. Elena returned to the penthouse 3 days later, clutching a bag of children's books she'd been collecting from the publishing house. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the elevator climbed, equal parts anticipation and terror. She'd spent the past 72 hours alternating between excitement and panic, her emotions swinging wildly between hope and self-preservation. Keisha had been characteristically blunt when Elena had confessed what happened. Girl, you met this man in a park during a snowstorm, and now you're playing house with his kids. This is either the beginning of a beautiful love story or a lifetime movie that ends badly. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Elena had muttered. I'm serious, Elena. You're vulnerable right now. David destroyed you. And this Andre guy, he's grieving, raising kids alone, probably looking for a replacement mother more than a partner. Are you sure you're not just a convenient solution to his problems? The question had haunted Elena for 3 days. Was she a solution? A band-aid for a family hemorrhaging from loss? Or was this connection real, born from genuine recognition rather than desperate need? The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and the answer to her questions came running at her in the form of Maya, who launched herself at Elena with zero regard for personal safety. You came back. Daddy said you would, but Oliver said you probably realized we're too much work and Sophie didn't say anything because she never does, but I knew you'd come back. Maya, let the woman breathe, Andre said, appearing from the kitchen. He wore jeans and a cable-knit sweater that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a regular dad. His smile was cautious but genuine. I'm glad you're here. I brought books, Elena said, holding up the bag like a peace offering. For Sophie. And Oliver. And Maya, though I suspect you don't need encouragement in the reading department. I'll read anything. Maya declared, already digging through the bag. The afternoon unfolded with an ease that both comforted and unsettled Elena. She read to Sophie, who curled against her side with a trust that made Elena's throat tight. She discussed the merits of various fantasy series with Oliver, who gradually shed his defensive posture. She helped Maya construct an elaborate fort in the living room that would have made architectural engineers weep. And through it all, Andre watched with an expression Elena couldn't quite decode, gratitude mixed with something darker, something that looked almost like guilt. It was during dinner. Elena had started staying for meals, a pattern emerging before any of them had consciously agreed to it, that everything began to unravel. Andre's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and something flickered across his face. I need to take this. Work emergency. He disappeared into his study, and Elena continued helping Maya cut her chicken. But through the partially open door, she could hear fragments of conversation. Yes, I know we discussed this, the timeline hasn't changed. I understand the optics, but, no, I haven't told them yet. Oliver's fork clattered against his plate. He's talking about the London move. Elena's head snapped up. What? The London move, Oliver repeated, his voice flat. Khan Technologies is opening a major office in London. Daddy's been planning to relocate us there for months. Didn't he tell you? The room tilted. Maya had gone very quiet, and Sophie's eyes were wide with something that looked like fear. Oliver, you're not supposed to talk about that, Maya said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Why not? It's happening whether we talk about it or not. Oliver's face was flushed, anger bleeding through his careful control. We're leaving in 6 weeks. Selling this place, enrolling in new schools, starting over in a different country where we don't know anyone. Again. Elena felt like she'd been punched in the chest. 6 weeks. Andre had invited her into their lives, let his children get attached, let her begin to imagine a future, and he'd known all along they were leaving. I'm sure your father had his reasons for not mentioning it yet, Elena managed, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. His reason is that he's a coward, Oliver said bitterly. He doesn't want to deal with us being upset, so he just pretends it's not happening. That's what he did with Mom's cancer too. Pretended everything was fine until it wasn't. Oliver Khan, that's enough, Andre said sharply from the doorway. His face was pale, jaw clenched. Apologize to Miss Elena. For what? Telling her the truth you were too scared to share. Oliver stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. She deserves to know she's wasting her time. We're leaving, Miss Elena. Just like everyone leaves. Might as well get used to it now. He stormed off to his room, the door slamming with enough force to rattle the expensive artwork on the walls. The silence that followed was suffocating. Maya had tears streaming down her face. Sophie had disappeared entirely into her rabbit, her small body trembling. Girls, why don't you go watch a movie? Andre said quietly. I need to talk to Miss Elena. They fled, leaving Elena and Andre alone in the cavernous dining room with the remains of a meal that suddenly felt like a Last Supper. You're moving to London, Elena said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Andre's voice was strained. In 6 weeks. The company's expanding internationally, and I need to be there to oversee the launch. It's a 3-year commitment minimum. And you didn't think to mention this? At any point during the past week when I've been here nearly every day? I was going to. When? Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. After I fell completely in love with your children? After I'd restructured my entire life around being here? Or were you just going to disappear one day and leave me wondering what I did wrong? That's not fair, Andre said, but there was no heat in it. I didn't plan any of this. You were supposed to be a one-time encounter, a brief moment of connection, nothing more. But then you kept coming back, and the kids fell for you, and he ran his hands through his hair in frustration, I fell for you too. And suddenly the London move felt like a death sentence instead of a fresh start. So you just said nothing. Let me get attached. Let your children get attached. Elena's laugh was bitter. God, I'm an idiot. Keisha was right, I'm just a convenient solution. Someone to help with the kids until you leave, make the transition easier, and then you're gone. No. Andre's voice was fierce. You're not a solution. Damn it, Elena, you're the first person who made me feel alive again. The first person who looked at my broken family and didn't run screaming. The first person who. Stop, Elena interrupted, her voice breaking. Just stop. I can't do this again, Andre. I can't be left behind again. I already lost everything once, my marriage, my dreams, my entire future. I was finally starting to heal, and then you crashed into my life with your beautiful, broken children, and made me hope again. Made me think maybe I could have a family after all, just not the way I'd planned. Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. But it was all temporary, wasn't it? Another thing I can't keep. Another future that doesn't belong to me. She stood, her legs shaky. I need to go. Elena, please. Did you ever consider that maybe I could come with you? The words burst out before Elena could stop them, raw and desperate and humiliating. To London? Did you ever think about asking me? Andre's face crumpled. How could I? We've known each other for 2 weeks. I can't ask you to uproot your entire life, leave your job, move to another country for a relationship that barely exists. That would be insane. But it's less insane than pretending this meant nothing. Elena grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. You know what the worst part is? You're just like David. He couldn't see past my infertility to the person I actually am. And you can't see past your logistics to what we could actually be. You're both so focused on what's practical, what makes sense, that you're willing to throw away something real. That's not. I need space, Elena cut him off. I need time to think without your kids looking at me with hope in their eyes and you standing there making me want impossible things. She was halfway to the elevator when Maya appeared, her small face blotchy from crying. Please don't go, the little girl whispered. Please don't leave us like everyone else does. Elena's heart shattered completely. She knelt down, gathering Maya into a hug that felt like goodbye. I'm not leaving because I want to, sweetheart. I'm leaving because sometimes grown-ups make everything complicated when it should be simple. Then make it simple. Maya's voice was muffled against Elena's shoulder. You like us. We like you. Daddy likes you even though he's bad at showing it. Why can't you just come with us? Because I'm terrified, Elena thought. Because I've already been abandoned once, and I don't know if I can survive it happening again. But she couldn't say that to a 6-year-old who'd already lost her mother. It's not that simple, Maya. It is, the little girl insisted. You're just scared. That's okay. We're scared too. But Mommy used to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you do the thing anyway. Elena looked up to find Andre standing in the doorway, his face raw with emotion. Behind him, Oliver had emerged from his room, and Sophie stood clutching her rabbit. I'm sorry, Andre said, his voice rough. For not telling you sooner. For making you feel like you were disposable. For being too afraid to ask for what I actually want. What do you want? Elena asked, still kneeling with Maya in her arms. Andre took a breath, and in that moment, Elena saw him shed every layer of protective armor he'd built around himself. I want you to come with us, he said simply. To London. I want to see where this goes without an expiration date hanging over our heads. I want my children to have someone who looks at them like they're miracles instead of burdens. I want to fall asleep knowing you're in the next room and wake up to coffee with you and build something new together from all our broken pieces. He crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking you to replace Sophia or even to be the kid's mother, not yet, maybe not ever, that's up to them and you. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to take a risk on us. On me. On this strange, unexpected family we seem to be building. Elena stood slowly, Maya still clinging to her. Her mind was screaming at her to protect herself, to run before she got hurt again. But her heart, her stupid, hopeful heart, was reaching for the possibility Andre was offering. I need time, she said finally. To think. To figure out if I'm brave enough for this. How much time? Andre asked. Elena looked at the four of them, Andre with his desperate hope, Maya with her fierce optimism, Oliver with his careful cynicism, and Sophie with her quiet need. A week, she said. Give me a week to decide if I'm jumping off this cliff with you. The week felt like a year. Elena moved through her days in a fog, editing manuscripts without reading them, attending meetings without hearing a word. At night, she lay awake in her queen's apartment, staring at the ceiling and weighing the impossible choice before her. Keisha came over on day 3 with wine and brutal honesty. Look, I know I was skeptical before. But I've never seen you like this, Elena. Even with David at his best, you never glowed the way you do when you talk about those kids. I'm terrified, Elena admitted. What if I move to London and it all falls apart? What if he realizes I'm not what he needs? What if the kids decide they don't want me after all? What if it works? Keisha countered. What if you're so busy protecting yourself from pain that you miss out on actual joy? On day 5, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Oliver. Miss Elena, I'm sorry for what I said. Dad's been miserable all week. So has Maya. Sophie won't talk at all anymore. I know you're scared. We're scared too. But maybe being scared together is better than safe and alone. She cried for an hour after reading it. On day 6, a package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a drawing from Maya, stick figures holding hands, one labeled, Elena, with hearts around it. At the bottom, please come be our family. Elena called her boss that afternoon. I need to talk to you about something. Day 7 arrived with snow falling again, as if the universe enjoyed poetry. Elena stood in Central Park at the exact bench where she'd met them, her suitcase beside her. She'd given notice at her apartment, told her boss she was taking the London position their UK office had been trying to fill for months, and packed everything that mattered. She was either the bravest or stupidest woman alive. Possibly both. Her phone rang. Andre's name flashed on the screen. Hello, she answered. It's been a week, he said, his voice tight with tension. I'm trying to respect your space, but I'm going insane. Elena, please, just tell me. I'm in Central Park, she interrupted. At the bench where we met. Silence. Then, stay there. 20 minutes later, she saw them coming through the snow, Andre practically running, the children struggling to keep up. Maya spotted her first and shrieked, breaking into a sprint that sent her crashing into Elena's legs. You came back, the little girl sobbed. You came back. Andre reached them, breathing hard, his eyes searching Elena's face. The suitcase, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What does the suitcase mean? Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the magnitude of what she was about to say. It means I'm terrified, she said. It means this is insane and impractical and probably the most reckless thing I've ever done. It means I might regret this, and it might not work, and we might all end up with broken hearts. She reached out, taking his hand, feeling the solid warmth of it. But it also means I'm done playing it safe. I'm done protecting myself from pain by avoiding joy. I'm done letting fear make my decisions. She looked at the children, then back at Andre. It means I'm coming with you. To London. To whatever this becomes. Because Maya was right, being scared together is better than being safe and alone. Andre pulled her into his arms, and she felt him shaking, whether from relief or cold or emotion, she couldn't tell. Maybe all three. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. Thank you for being brave enough for both of us. Oliver was actually smiling. Sophie had released her rabbit to hug Elena's leg. And Maya was dancing in the snow, singing about families and London and new adventures. They were a strange constellation of broken people choosing to be broken together. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of healing. 6 months later, London greeted them with rain instead of snow, but Elena had learned that weather was just weather, what mattered was who you weathered it with. The townhouse in Kensington was smaller than the Manhattan penthouse, but infinitely warmer. Elena had helped decorate it, blending Sophia's memory with their new reality. Photos of the children's mother occupied places of honor, but now they were joined by new memories, Elena and Maya covered in paint from art projects, Oliver teaching Elena about British football, Sophie finally speaking full sentences about her day at school. Elena's job at the London publishing office had been a perfect fit, and her co-workers had welcomed her with the kind of warmth that made her wonder why she'd been so afraid to start over. She'd even made friends, real friends who invited her for coffee and didn't treat her like a charity case. But the best part was the family she came home to every evening. Miss Elena. Maya burst through the front door, now 7 and somehow even more energetic. Guess what happened at school today? Let her take off her coat first, Andre said, appearing from the kitchen. He'd been working from home more, prioritizing presents over profits. The company hadn't collapsed. In fact, it thrived. He kissed Elena's cheek, a casual intimacy that still made her heart skip after 6 months. They'd been taking things slowly, carefully, building a foundation rather than rushing toward labels. But last week, he'd whispered, "I love you," while they did dishes, and she'd said it back without hesitation. Oliver emerged from his room, now 9 and cautiously optimistic about life. "Dad's making that terrible fish thing again. I tried to stop him." "It's not terrible," Andre protested. "Elena likes it." "Elena's just too polite to tell you the truth," Oliver said, but he was grinning. Sophie appeared last, clutching a paper. "I drew us," she said shyly, handing it to Elena. "Our family." The drawing showed 6 figures, 3 children, Andre, Elena, and hovering above them all, a woman with angel wings. Sophia, watching over them, blessing this strange new constellation they'd become. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect, Sophie. Absolutely perfect." That night, after the children were asleep, Andre found Elena on their small terrace overlooking the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts," he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was thinking about David," she admitted. "About how devastated I was when he left. How I thought my life was over because I couldn't give him children." She turned to face Andre, her hands finding his. "But if he hadn't left, I never would have been in that park. Never would have met Maya and Oliver and Sophie. Never would have found you." She smiled through her tears. "He rejected me for being childless. And then a billionaire with 2 kids," she paused, laughing softly, "well, 3 kids now, chose me. Not despite my infertility, but for who I am. For what I could offer your children that had nothing to do with biology." 3 kids. Andre raised an eyebrow. "We're adopting Sophie's friend from school. The one in foster care. Don't pretend you haven't already talked to the social worker." Andre had the grace to look sheepish. "She needs a family. We have room." "We do," Elena agreed. "We have so much room. Sometimes rejection is just redirection towards something better." Elena lost the family she thought she wanted, only to find the family she was always meant for. Have you ever had a closed door lead you to something more beautiful than you imagined? Share your story below, your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. She kissed him then, soft and sure, tasting like coffee and promise and future. Behind them, the city sparkled with possibility. Inside, 3 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow their family would still be there. Elena Markson had been rejected, abandoned, told she wasn't enough. But standing here in London with rain beginning to fall and a man who loved her wholly, she finally understood the truth: she had always been enough. She'd just been waiting for people who could see it. And now, surrounded by a family built from broken pieces and brave choices, she was finally, completely, home. The end. Elena's journey reminds us that sometimes our greatest pain leads to our greatest joy. She was rejected for being childless, and then chosen by a family who needed exactly who she was. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Have you ever experienced a blessing that came disguised as a loss? Your story matters.